Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about Mistborn, and it's actually been quite a while since I read this. I read this last year. Was it last year or was it the year before? It's due a reread. I'm putting it on my channel, or maybe I'll do a reread this year and then I'll update it. Shut up. Today I'm going to give you my thoughts on the original trilogy as a whole. Brandon Sanderson is an author that rose to prominence when he finished The Wheel of Time. His most popular series, or rather most epic and influential to the genre series, is arguably the Stormlight Archive. But before the Stormlight Archive was published, he had a lovely little series which created a bit of a fandom, and that is the wonderful series known as Mistborn. And the tagline for the first book, which is called The Final Empire, although for some reason it's being rebranded recently as, well, not recently, but for some reason it's been rebranded as just Mistborn. But the tagline for the first book is, "What if the Dark Lord won?" And I mean, in some ways that's what it's about. I would say that the main selling point for this is its intricate video game-like hard magic system. The magic system is called allomancy, and it is based on allomancers ingesting and then burning internally various metals to give themselves special abilities. And it's a hard magic system where it has legitimate rules and limitations. And the story itself revolves around this dark world where nobles have the genetics that bring forth allomancers from within their spawn. It's within a world where ash falls from the sky, the sun is red, and they live within a feudal society which is under the power of the Dark Lord, or the Lord Ruler, who is essentially like a living god. That's how he's like the figurehead of their religion. And this trilogy is filled with so many twists and plot turns, and they're all foreshadowed well, and for the most part they're really surprising. And I just think the structure and plot elements and the way that character development has a relationship with the movement of the plot, it all just weaves really nicely and satisfyingly. Is satisfyingly a word? Yeah, satisfyingly is probably a word. And it all feels like it's leading to something. And whether you like the ending or not, there is decent setup and there's pretty crazy payoff. I guess it just depends on how you feel about the thematic aspects of these books. And of course it has a Sanderson avalanche at the end where you just can't help but turn the pages. The way the plot just drives you towards... He's a good plotter. He's just a good plotter when it comes to creating narratives that start off just slow enough for you to get stuck into the world and the characters, and then when the stakes start rising and tensities rise, the plot progression and the pacing speeds up accordingly. Now you have three main characters. You have Vin, Kelsea, and Sazed. I mean, they're all engaging in their own way. Vin is a typical YA type protagonist, you know, like a tomboy-esque, not like other girls, strong female protagonist. So she felt a bit tropey and a bit cliche to me, but actually the way Brandon Sanderson handles her as a character makes her one of the best characters in fantasy. So it's just another example of how he can sit on the shoulders of various tropes and do them well. And I actually just did a video called Fantasy Tropes I Love, and I kept complimenting how the tropes that are considered tired, Brandon Sanderson can often do them really well and just handle them in a way that makes them not feel tired or old. And I really found that he handled Vin's character really well, and the development of her character, even despite the way she initially started out, came across very YA, young adult to me. Maybe other people disagree with me, I don't know. She's a 16-year-old girl, she's got short hair, she's pretty badass, and she's angsty. If that isn't a typical YA character, I don't know what is. Then you have Kelsea, he's a whole lot of fun. You know, he's enjoyable to read, he's likeable, he's enjoyable to follow, he's confident, he's a presence on the page, he has charisma like no other, and he's fairly emotionally complex. And some of the twists in the books involving him as a character were some of the most shocking moments to me, and I think they were handled brilliantly. Sazed was hit or miss for me. Often I really liked him as a character, but I remember finding him a bit boring, especially in the third book. He had a right to be a bit mopey, I suppose, but I think having a character that's a bit down in the dumps is hard to write. It probably seems a bit harsh to say, oh, people don't want to read characters that are being depressive, and that probably is a bit rude to people that genuinely are depressive. But when it's translated to fiction, people are less forgiving as they are in real life. In fiction, it's more satisfying for characters to be proactive and, pick themselves up, because we all want to project ourselves onto these characters. People like heroic characters because people want to see themselves as heroes. People don't want to see themselves for the losers that they are. And at times, Sazed came across a bit mopey. It wasn't too much of an issue for me because he did have some good character moments and he had a fairly decent character arc overall. But I've seen Brandon Sanderson handle this better. With Kaladin in the Stormlight Archive, he handled Kaladin's mindset and his grief and his depressive, mopey nature, in my opinion, with more nuance. And I know they're different characters, but seeing how Brandon Sanderson can handle elements in later books that he's written, I can't help but compare them. And I think that's one of my main criticisms, which isn't really a criticism because it didn't hinder my enjoyment really that much. But it is evident that between writing Mistborn and writing the Stormlight Archive, Brandon Sanderson has gotten better. He has clearly become a better writer. You can track his progress. If you read his books in the order in which he wrote them, you can really see how he has improved in regards to technical writing with each new book. Maybe he hasn't improved narratively, because that's a subjective thing. Some people might not like some of the narrative decisions he's made in later books. For example, a lot of people have huge problems with Oathbringer, which is the third book in Stormlight. I had a lot of criticisms, but I didn't find his narrative decisions to be as overwhelmingly bad as other people have. But his technical writing and his prose is so much better now than it was when he wrote Mistborn. However, my criticisms of his prose in this book isn't that the prose is bad, it's just that it's weaker than his later entries into the Cosmere and the rest of his portfolio. But the prose within these books is a bit clunky at times. Brandon Sanderson is hardly a wordsmith in these books, but they do the job. And I would actually say that the Mistborn Trilogy, although the books aren't small, they're pretty thick. This is just the first one, The Final Empire. But these books, if you're just getting into Brandon Sanderson or just getting into epic fantasy in general, I would recommend the Mistborn Trilogy as the first place to enter that genre, probably. Although it really does depend on what people like, because the hard magic system is very mathematical in a sense. It's very rigid and there's rules, and there are legitimate rules that you as a reader have to learn, and you have to learn how those things work. And some readers might not vibe with that, but I think the typical fantasy reader probably will really enjoy and appreciate the work done with regards to the world building and the magic and the character work in this trilogy. So book 1, The Final Empire, is an Ocean's 11 type heist story, and that's the book. The book is essentially a heist plot with an epic fantasy backdrop, and it's done well. And in a way, it stands on its own. Even though the story is continued, you could just read the first book and you could stop there and you've sort of got a complete story. You kind of have a complete story. I'm going to be a spanner in the works again, and I'm going to disagree with the consensus, because most reviews that I've seen and read and comments that I've seen about these books on various forums like Reddit and 17th Shard, which is the Cosmere thing. And the Cosmere is Brandon Sanderson's shared universe, for any of you that don't know, although you probably do if you're watching this. But a lot of people consider book 2 to be the weakest. Book 2 is my favourite one. I really like these simmering plots. I think I like build-up of tension. I've decided that I must enjoy siege-type storylines. And when I say a siege-type storyline, I don't even necessarily mean an actual siege. I just mean a story where tension and anxiety just build up and build up and build up and build up and build up. And you really feel like the narrative is leading to something bad. And I think the character work done in book 2 is the best character work in the whole of the trilogy. Book 3 for me is the weakest, and there's various reasons for that. The third book does land with an epic conclusion, but I think the epic conclusion was a bit extra. The power escalation in the third book is a bit stupid. It worked and it was sort of set up, but I do think it was kind of over the top. For one, over the course of the whole trilogy, Brandon Sanderson repeats himself, and that is one of my main criticisms, is that he assumes that you haven't understood the magic system. Like, he makes sure that he lets you know how the magic system works again. Even though he's already explained these things to you in the narrative, you get told again and then again. And I understand that that's because there might be a gap in between the books and some people might not remember how things happened, but I'm not an idiot. I hate that in books. I really don't like it. It just makes me feel patronised. It seems like Brandon Sanderson is going, oh, my readers are too stupid to remember how this thing works, so I'm going to tell them again. And there's another issue like that, where I feel like my intelligence is being underestimated. The lore-splaining that happens at the start of every chapter in the whole of the trilogy. In fact, in most Brandon Sanderson books. In the first book, it was intriguing. You know, sometimes it's an excerpt from like an in-world book. In the Stormlight Archive, it's little historical notes that Yasna has found and various other things and quotes from stuff that's within the world, and it's cool little world building. In the third Mistborn book, it's just explaining the magic system. At the start of every chapter, you get a weird little paragraph that's just spoon feeding you information about the magic system, like you're just the biggest moron ever, and that there was no way that Brandon Sanderson could have weaved the information into the narrative. And I understand that he had to fit a lot into that third book. A lot of information, a lot more world building, loads of stuff had to happen in that book. But it just felt lazy to me. Aside from those criticisms, this trilogy is a thrill ride, an awesome plot, an amazing world, a great magic system, and the action scenes that involve using the magic system to solve problems is so fun and satisfying. There's loads of setup and payoff and awesome twists that were foreshadowed well, interesting fantasy races, interesting politics, awesome cultures, great characters, and overall, I can't recommend Mistborn enough. So, I'm going to rate each book individually and then the series as a whole, because I like to overcomplicate things. So overall, I'm going to give book 1 a 7. I think it's way above average. It feels fresh and interesting, but there are those technical limitations and spoon-feeding issues that hold it back from being really great, in my opinion. Book 2 is a 7.5 because I think it is better than the first one. I think it has the best character work of the whole trilogy and a really tense plot and a really good ending. The third book is a 6.5 because I think it is the weakest of the three, and I think the ending is not pretentious. I think it's a bit crazier than it had a right to be. But I still think it's a satisfying ending to the whole series. So if I was to average that out, the whole trilogy, as all three stories stand and exist together, would be a 7 out of 10 overall. And remember, my rating system is 10 being an absolute masterpiece, 5 being completely average, and 0 being banish it to the mists. But Mistborn is well worth the read. Thank you for watching. If you liked that video, give it a thumbs up because that really helps me out of the algorithm and gets my stuff recommended, which is great. Please comment and engage because I love to hear your opinions. I love to engage in discussions. Please subscribe and stick around because I have loads of content to come, including my own writing. So if you're interested in that, stay subscribed, hit the notification bell, and then one day you'll be able to see some more new fantasy, which hopefully is good. Fingers crossed. I have an Instagram and I post stories most days, so you go ahead and follow that. I have a Discord that about 3 people are in, so if you want to start a community and start having some conversations, then join the Discord, please. And yeah, I am done. There you go. There's another video to go on my channel. Completed. Done. Finito. Peace. Bye.